Welcome back to Old School Sports and our Out of the Park Baseball 25 series, Can We Save the Oakland A's? And we are at the beginning of the 2029 offseason. We are the World Series champion Oakland A's, so in a way we have already saved the Oakland A's, but as we talked about at the end of our World Championship winning episode 2 episodes ago, and also in our previous episode, we're in an interesting situation where despite the fact that we won the AL West, won the World Series, increased attendance materially, and delivered a profit of about $27 million to Mr. John Fisher, our owner, he still decided that it made sense to cut our budget by $2 million to $124 million next year. So that was a bit unexpected given the strong improvement that we made on many metrics this past year. And it's led to a lot of soul searching by myself as to what the right way to proceed with this playthrough is. And a lot of you have shared interesting ideas with me in the comments to the last couple of episodes that I also appreciate. The ideas that have been floated out there are you just retire on top, completely start over, and stick it to Mr. Fisher. You come back with the A's just as they are and keep playing this series. You come back with the A's, but you tweak the budget and you tweak the fan interest and some of the things that are quirks of the game that don't seem to be reflecting the realism of a team that just won a World Series title. You do what a logical capitalist would do, and you leverage this championship season and title on your resume to jump to a big market team where you can really make a true mark on the game and burnish a potential case to be in the Hall of Fame 30 years from now. Or you leave the A's and you go to a rebuilding effort, and the Detroit Tigers, the Los Angeles Angels have both been noted as teams by viewers that we should perhaps consider for that. And I'll have a decision on what we're going to do, certainly by our next episode. I'm going to have to do something at that point. The one thing that I know I'm not going to do, I'm not going to start going into commish mode and giving myself a bunch bigger budget with Oakland or tweaking the fan interest, even if it is kind of more realistic than what the game has delivered. That's just not something that I really have any interest in doing. But all of the other options that I think I've outlined, and probably a couple other things that will be mentioned in subsequent comments, or perhaps were already mentioned in comments that I just forgot to recap right here, are still on the table. It's an interesting dilemma, but at the very least we'll be making the decision from a position of strength as the World Series champions here in 2029. And I think some of you noticed that when we guided this team to the playoffs this year, our reputation went from poor to fair. And when we won the World Series, it went from fair to okay. So that is a metric of the game that's able to improve rapidly, unlike the fan interest, at least with these Oakland A's. So there's a few things we'd like to tackle in this episode today. First, and I wouldn't say foremost, but first we do want to take a look at some of the top prospects throughout baseball who we have thought about picking in previous drafts, thought about in previous international amateur free agent periods, and for whatever reasons, they did not end up high enough on our priority list. Taking a look at some batters Byron Dervish, number 30 prospect in baseball, was part of the first international free agent signing pool we had an opportunity to partake in 2025. Loved his power and his personality. He is definitely struggling to hit, though. 189 average with 155 strikeouts in 370 at-bats in A-ball this year, with 18 home runs, is a very Hidero Endo-like type batting line from Dervish, and unfortunately for him, it's happening in A-ball rather than in the major leagues. If he reaches his full potential, it still looks like he could be a pretty useful major league power hitter, but kind of not really feeling like we missed out on too much by going in a different direction. Talked about Joe Edwards a few episodes ago. He's probably the biggest regret I have of players that we didn't go after. Captain personality, an excellent defensive third baseman, an incredible hitter. Hit .295 this year, 43 doubles, 41 homers, 128 ribbies, scored 110 runs, OPS of close to 1,000, and a 155 WRC plus with a 7 WAR. I will note, though, that 155 WRC plus was just a little bit behind both Tyler Soderstrom and our third baseman, Colt Keith. So we won a championship without him, but certainly would be very interesting to have had Joe Edwards on the team. Jesus de la Campa, a 19-year-old number 46 prospect in baseball, and he's, I guess, just been promoted to the Dominican Rookie League out of the International Complex after the season ended. Has not played anywhere, so we are at low scouting accuracy with him since we really haven't likely checked in on him at all since the IAFA period a couple years ago. David Orta is a guy that we were pretty interested in our second IAFA period in 2026. He's split this year between rookie ball and A-ball, only a .232 average in rookie ball, and then he was 1 for 13 in a very small sample size in A-ball. His personality has, I think, gone in a negative direction since we scouted him. I have a hard time believing that I would have been almost ready to take him as our primary target if he had the high greed and the low intelligence back then, but I can't really remember. But if he fully develops, still looks like he could be an interesting major leaguer. But at 20 years old, with the ratings he currently has and just barely making it out of rookie ball, certainly no guarantees that he is going to develop. Greg Cuff is a guy that we thought seriously about taking at the top of the draft this year, and it looks like he was drafted 10th overall by the Pirates, and he failed to sign with them and is going to the Ohio State University instead. So he'll be back in the draft in a few years. Maybe we'll get another shot at him, although hopefully we'll be picking too late in the draft again in a few years to be able to look at a guy like Greg Cuff. We were picking third this year, and certainly we're going to be right near the end of the draft this upcoming year and probably, hopefully, going forward. Galterio Mancina, international free agent signing also from that first year, the number 4 prospect in baseball. Had a solid year in rookie A-ball this year, .262 average, 27 homers, 64 ribbies, 134 WRC plus. The bat has always been the attraction of Mancina, and he still looks like he could be a pretty interesting player. And last but not least, Daniel Campos, a player we considered a year and a half ago plus in the IAFA period of 2028. Had a very productive year in rookie ball this past year as an 18-year-old. Presumably he will be competing to be in A-ball next year with the Brewers organization. Turning to the pitchers that we have thought about and missed out on or decided to go in a different direction on over the years, Jeremy Martin, he was picked 9th overall in 2028 out of Indiana. A guy that we strongly considered in the draft a year ago. Had a pretty productive season this year between A ball and high A. 2-1 with a 1.78 ERA in A ball, and then he was 7-8 with a 3.10 ERA. Struck out 169 batters in just 122 innings in A ball. I think they're probably actually taking his development a little slower than I would. He's going to be turning 24 before next season. He's viewed as the number 12 prospect in baseball. And when you look at his ratings, even compared to Double A, he looks more than ready to compete at that level. So a little surprised that he didn't make it to Double A this year. But Steel Arm Johnny still looks like he could be a pretty good major league pitcher. Andres Medina, an IAFA signing from 2028, still at the Dodgers complex. Chris Patterson is a guy that we were very intrigued in the 2028 draft. He ended up not signing with the team that drafted him, the Texas Rangers, after he was picked 3rd overall. We loved him as a prospect. He was just looking for a crazy amount of money. So he will be back in the draft in a few years as a college player coming out of Washington. Probably not going to be in a position to grab him, but would love the opportunity if things don't go as we hope they do on the major league field over the next few years. Connor Pfister is a guy that we seriously thought about in the draft this past year. Thought that going with a college pitcher might be a way to really help our growth at the major league level over the next few years. Loved some of his personality traits. He's assigned to high A ball, but it doesn't look like he actually pitched at all this year. He didn't sign until September 6th, so the Nationals, who picked him 15th overall, kind of wasted a year that he could have been in the minors, or at least wasted a couple of months that he could have been in the minors. So that's a little bit disappointing, but we'll see more about Pfister next year. Omari Raphael is the guy that we were incredibly intrigued by this year. A brilliant high school pitching prospect, and another guy who did not end up being signed. Drafted 26th overall by the Rockies, who failed to sign him. And he's going to Piedmont College. So not necessarily, I don't know anything about Piedmont College, except I don't think it is a Division I school in one of the top divisions in college athletics. I could be wrong about that. It could be a random Division I school I've never heard of, but a little bit surprising for a player with his profile to go to a lower profile college baseball program. So he'll likely be back in the draft in a few years, and maybe we'll get a shot at him again, although we probably won't. Andres Rojas, second-round draft pick, 47th overall by the Marlins. He was a guy that we were hoping would fall to us with the 53rd pick, and he did not. Off to a really nice start in his major league career, 9-3 in 21 starts for Miami this year. 3.51 ERA and a WAR of close to 2, 1.24 ERA plus, and a 96 FIP minus. So he looks like he's going to be a very good major league pitcher. Juan Sanabria, an international free agent signing again from that first IAFA period in 2025. Number 27 prospect in baseball, but the growth has been slow. Only made it to A ball this year, where he went 1-9. Did have a 3.61 ERA, but his FIP minus was below average, and his Sierra was not particularly impressive. Still looks like he could be a useful major league pitcher and a useful major league starter if he fully develops. But he is fragile, and thus far the development has not been incredibly fast, but still think he could be a good, solid major league pitcher. Matt Scott is the guy who was picked 27th overall in the first round of 2025, and he has developed into a, I guess, proven major league pitcher at this point with parts of the last 3 seasons in the majors. 10-9 record this year for the Braves, but the 5.10 ERA and 27 home runs allowed in 157 at-bats, not the most impressive things. And then Alan Walling, a guy who we thought about taking out of the University of Southern Indiana in the 2028 draft as a college player. Our concerns about him were just the lack of velocity and the fact that he hadn't played at a top end college program. Felt like his ceiling was just a little lower than we'd like for a first round pick. Did have a very busy season this year though. Went all the way from high A ball to triple A, 11-4, 2.91 ERA in high A ball. Won 2 out of 3 starts with a 189 ERA in double A. And then they promoted him to triple A Salt Lake, where he was 0-2 with a 5.29 ERA. Certainly looks like he could be helping at the major league level in very short order, and he's considered the number 15 prospect in baseball. So he is a guy that we passed on who has certainly worked out thus far. And while I was going through the pitchers, I did forget to mention while we were talking about Andres Rojas that he was the knuckleballer that we thought about taking and were really hoping was going to drop to us in the second round that we just missed out on. And thus far, that incredible knuckleball has proven to be a challenge for major league hitters and probably only going to get harder for them as he continues to develop. And before we take a look at our farm system, we'll take an early preview of some of the potential free agents who could be out there a few weeks from now. As tends to be a pretty deep and interesting group of potential closers, all of whom who are looking for pretty big money, about $13 to $24 million a year for the top end closers, which is certainly not a neighborhood that we're going to be playing in. Top-end starters available include Grayson Rodriguez, Brayan Bello. Unlikely to be able to afford either of them. We can probably afford Jacob deGrom, but he's wrecked physically, barely touching 90 miles an hour, 41 years old, and he's coming off of a torn UCL that cost him all of this past year. So a little surprised he's still trying to make it back to the majors at his age, but kudos to him for doing that. Logan Webb, Shane Baz also injured, so probably not going to be guys that we would be incredibly eager to go after. Andrew Nardi is a guy who we thought about trading for near the trade deadline last year. The price was just too expensive, and he's going to be looking for around $8.5 million on the open market. So that may be a little much for us for a lefty reliever. Andrew Heaney also going to be out there looking for a little bit less, although he doesn't have the same kind of stuff that Mr. Nardi does. Tanner Scott, who was on our team this year, I think we're unlikely to bring him back at over $12 million. And Gregory Soto, another left-handed reliever who may be out there, probably looking for too much money for us to afford. So I think the options on the free agent market for us to add a lefty arm, and we need probably at least 2 lefties, maybe 3 to balance out our potential rotation. Unfortunately, it doesn't look like there's going to be any slam dunk opportunities that we can really afford. Might just hope that 1 or 2 of these guys linger on the market for a few months and we can get a deal on them, but certainly no guarantees that that will occur. Turning to the position players who might be available this offseason, and there are some big-time players available. Elly De La Cruz, Francisco Alvarez, Nolan Schaunel, Andres Jimenez, Spencer Torkelson, among others. Some pretty high-end talent, unfortunately, and not surprisingly. all of that real high-end talent is looking for 25, 30, 35, 40 million a year. So given that we struggled to have a $60 million payroll a year ago, and our budget's going to be a little lower this upcoming season, I don't think those are the neighborhoods that we're going to be playing in. I'd love to add a good right-handed hitter this offseason. I just don't know how many opportunities there's going to be. Tyler Stevenson is marginally attractive to me as an option, a guy who can catch, a guy who does have a captain personality, and a guy who we could probably play in left field or at DH since we don't really need him at catcher. He could be a pretty useful hitter against left-handed pitching for us where we need some help. And the numbers he's potentially looking for, around $3.5 million, don't scare me away. Another guy that's kind of gaming the system a bit, but given how the way the game works and how Mr. Fisher have gamed me so far, I don't necessarily have any compunction against potentially gaming the system, is Willy Adames, another right-handed hitter making $25 million this year. Supposedly he might be on the market for only $6 million-ish. And if he is, I think he could be a pretty interesting guy for us to bring on board. Gives us a captain personality, gives us a solid, versatile defensive infielder, gives us a bat that we would not have a problem playing against left-handed pitching, and some depth against righties. He's durable in terms of his injury proneness, and most importantly, he's extremely popular locally, and it might result in a decent boost to fan interest if we were to bring Willy Adames on board in Oakland. Now, exactly why Willy Adames, who's 34 years old, out of the Dominican, and has never played in Oakland in his career, is so extremely popular locally, is a bit unclear to me. But if I can potentially bring the kid on board and get a little bit of a boost to fan interest, sell a few more tickets, hopefully generate some more money for greedy virtual Mr. Fisher that at some point maybe he will share with us and allow us to actually reinvest in the team going forward. Adames seems to be a guy who might enable us to do that, but we're certainly not going to be playing at the top end of the market, unfortunately. It's going to be more maybe a player or two initially who aren't looking for big money, like a Stevenson or an Adames, and then hoping that 3 or 4 months from now we can maybe supplement in a left-handed reliever who happens to linger on the market. And if one of the top players happens to linger on the market, we'd love it if there was an opportunity to pick them up for much less money in a few months, but not necessarily expecting that that will happen. So turning now to our farm system, and I guess the silver lining in us being so successful on the field this past year is that we're not going to need as much money set aside for potential draftees. Now, there's always the potential that a player with a big demand slides to the second or third round. So I think in a perfect world, we'd love to be able to allocate a bit more. But given that we are the defending World Series champions and we want to put up a credible defense to that title, probably going to be a little less aggressive this year in setting aside money for the draft, and hopefully a little more aggressive in having some money to improve our major league team. Starting to feel like we do have some help that's coming. We've started to get guys out of rookie ball, which it seems like where almost everyone that we've drafted over the first 5+ years or picked up over the first 5+ years in the IAFA pool have just been kind of stuck in rookie ball and unable to get out of there. And you can see that our Arizona Rookie League team is just a brutal team. We started this past year, based on a good suggestion from viewers, picking in the later rounds some players that were not really high-end prospects, not really major league prospects at all, but more experienced, a little older, and able to hopefully help that team win a few more games. Other than that, though, you can see we had 4 first-place teams out of 6 this year in our minor league system. So doing well, just kind of need to get that ACL team turned around. Sadly, that 322 winning percentage this year was 100 points higher than the brutal 222 winning percentage that rookie team had when they went 20 and 70 a season ago. So we are making some progress there. It's just going slowly, and you'll see when we get into some of the rookie players who are in the ACL rather than the DSL that their attitudes aren't great, and it's largely still driven just by the losing. So we want to fix that. But overall, 12th ranked minor league system, and you can see we've got 4 top 60 prospects now. Jake Ortega, the popular draft choice that we made 3rd overall out of Oregon State, is viewed as the number 13 prospect in baseball. Started him in A-ball, where he did very well, and then we promoted him to high A, where he hit 272 with 11 doubles and 10 homers and 173 at-bats, put up a 139 WRC plus. Taking a look at his ratings, and we didn't promote him to the Texas League this year just because he looks fine and ready to play there, but he wasn't necessarily going to excel there. But certainly would anticipate that at 22 years old, he'll be starting next year in Double-A for us. Hopefully we'll promote him to Triple-A at some point during the year. And it's not inconceivable that he could be a September call-up for us. And maybe if we're back in the playoffs again next year, the switch-hitting Jake Ortega could play a role for us in the postseason in 2030. Arturo Estrada, international free agent signing from 2 years ago. I think he could be an absolute hitting machine with that contact and gap power and speed. Actually regressed a little bit in rookie ball this year, but to be fair, he was 17 years old most of the season. He's just such an advanced prospect that we started him right off in rookie ball as a 16-year-old a year and a half ago when he hit 330. The batting average dipped to 302 this year, but he still was an above-average offensive player, has a lot of really positive personality traits, and the hope is that although he's kind of in a similar situation to Ortega where he's not going to necessarily excel in single A if we promote him next year based on his ratings, I think he's ready to make that jump as an 18-year-old next year. So Estrada could be helping us in the majors 3 or 4 years from now if things go well. Probably can say something similar about Bertrand Albrighton, international free agent signing from 2026. He's slowly progressed through rookie ball in the DSL, put up a 116 WRC plus this year, hit just under 300 for us. Another guy with a ton of positive personality traits, and he will be in single A ball for us a year from now, or less than a year from now, about 6 months from now, as a 20-year-old. And our last top 100 prospect is Jaheim Penniman, who we picked 2nd overall in the draft in 2028. Only a 1-2 record in rookie ball this year, but did put up a 2.70 ERA with 84 strikeouts and 60 innings. Now, he walked 41 batters, so the control is still an issue, but we still promoted him to A-ball as a 19-year-old, and he handled that level fine. 2-4 record with a 3.22 ERA. Did give up 6 homers and 19 walks in 44 2/3 innings, but he only allowed 29 hits and he struck out 52, so still think he could be a pretty high-end pitcher if everything works out. Probably will start next year in A-ball, I would guess. You can see he looks like he can be fine at that level, but not necessarily excel. But would certainly hope that some point next year we promote him to high A-ball and certainly seems, if he continues to develop and improve, that 2 or 3 years from now he could be pushing to be a September call-up for us, and certainly a high-end arm that we developed organically in our system would be a nice asset for us to have down the line. In addition to the 4 prospects in the top 100, more specifically the 4 prospects in the top 58, we've also got 6 additional prospects who are in the top 200. Alejandro Landin, international free agent signing from 2027. Another guy who regressed a little bit in the DSL this year, but still like the potential for him to be a very well-rounded hitter, good defensive player, good personality. He was 18 in rookie ball this year in the DSL, and he did miss some games with some injuries, so certainly was a respectable performance, albeit not great. Looks like he's pretty borderline for being ready for A-ball at the start of next year. Hopefully he'll get a little better this offseason. If not, would think that by July or August of next year, probably August, he would get promoted to A-ball for us. David Ramirez is a guy that we did promote to A-ball this year. He was effective in rookie ball, but he was kind of struggling with the attitude issues associated with some of the people on that rookie ball team. And given that he was a 14th overall pick for us, we just wanted to get him to a team that was doing better. And you can see his morale is now good at this point. And he actually produced a bit better in A-ball than he did in rookie ball, hitting 276 with a 161 WRC plus over 50 games. Guy who we think could be a pretty useful infielder for us over the next few seasons. He'll be 21 early next year. Josh Mangano, a guy that we picked in the second round in the 2028 draft, spent the year with the ACL team. You can see the unhappy morale, and you can see it's driven pretty much entirely by the team record there, which we're trying to fix. 0-7 record for that brutal team with a 6.43 ERA. In 70 innings pitched, he did strike out 93 batters, which is the positive, but he gave up 15 home runs and 54 walks. So a lot of work for Mr. Mangano to do to realize his potential. Juan Rodas is the international free agent signing from 2025, a guy who we talked earlier in this episode about several of those guys that we looked at in the 2025 draft, and Rodas ended up being the guy that we were most interested in. Potentially a pretty good fielder with a decent right-handed bat for a middle infielder. Promoted him to A-ball this year after he was dominant in rookie ball as a 20-year-old. Turned 21 while he was playing in A-ball, but definitely struggled there. Hit just a .73. Did turn that into a 91 WRC plus by virtue of the 4 home runs that he hit and the fact that he drew 15 walks. Still have some hope that he's going to be a useful major leaguer. You look at his potential, and if he's able to reach the potential with that bat, with that glove, and with that personality, he's a pretty valuable middle infielder. I think the question now, though, is at 21 years old, is he going to ultimately realize his full potential? Hopefully we can still help get him there. Roussel Shepard, another middle infielder, picked him 4th overall in 2026. He is the guy that we took instead of Joe Edwards, figuring that Shepard was a more economic option for us. Really like the glove, love the speed. The question is whether the bat will ultimately be major league quality. Split this past year between A-ball and high A. Was a bit above average as an offensive player in A-ball, but he was pretty brutal in high A, hitting just a .90 with a 23 WRC plus. He's going to be turning 22 shortly. You know, we look at his ratings relative to the Midwest League, and it looks like he can hold his own in high A ball, even though he didn't necessarily do that this year. not quite ready for Double A in the Texas League, unfortunately. So probably going to be starting next year as a 22-year-old in high A ball, and the hope is that we'll be able to get him promoted to Double A before the end of the season. Last but not least, Kevin Stubblefield, second-round pick in 2027, split the year between rookie ball, where he hit 15 homers, and A ball, where the home runs dried up with just 2 in 126 at-bats. He did, however, improve his batting average to 262 and actually improved his WRC plus to 28. Only 20 years old, so the fact that he's already made it to A-ball is pretty solid. Think he could still be a pretty interesting bat. We look at the California League, and he should be pretty productive there, so it's not inconceivable that we may promote him to start next year at high A. Certainly think he's a guy who could be hopefully a first base / DH type for us 2 or 3 years from now. And we won't go through all the rest of our top prospects, but we'll highlight a couple of them. Sergio Palomares, our international free agent signing from this year, just turned 17 in late June, so he's still at the international complex. Looks like he will be ready and more than ready for the DSL next year, so should be seeing what Gravedigger can do playing professional baseball in the not too distant future. Mike Finley and Sam Lishman were 2 guys that we picked up in this past year's draft. Definitely struggled in their introduction to pro ball out of high school. Finley, second-round pick, hit just a $173 in 81 at-bats. And Lishman, not much better, hitting a $186 in 86 at-bats. But they did at least get a little bit of an introduction to pro ball over those final few weeks after they signed. Duncan Marston, we talked about him in the previous episode. He was the guy that we picked 4th overall in our first draft in 2024. Finally made it to the majors this year, where he put up a 2.08 ERA over 8 2/3 innings. The things that I'm most excited about is that walks and keeping the ball in the ballpark have been his huge issues throughout the minors, and in the small sample size of 5 games, 8 2/3 innings, he didn't allow a home run, and he didn't allow a walk either. So very small sample size, and sure that will change, but Marston should be part of our pitching staff next year and possibly a part of our rotation. And one final prospect to talk about who's not listed as one of our top prospects anymore is the guy that we picked 10th in 2025, the left-handed hitting two-way player, Cruz Schoolcraft. Schoolcraft actually on the mound made some progress this year, a 10-1 record for high A Lansing with a 2.91 ERA. He did give up 16 homers and walked 39 batters in 108 in the 3rd innings, but struck out 132, had a whip of 1.09. Still really question whether his control is going to be major league quality. You can see we only think he can get to a 35 at this point. So that's actually a step in the wrong direction. Still hoping he turns out being a useful left-handed arm for us, but no guarantees that it's going to happen. But I think there's reason for a bit of optimism with the bat as well. In Lansing this year, he finally, for the first time in his professional career, showed the ability to actually make contact. Hit 275 with 20 homers and 240 at-bats, put up a 133 WRC plus. Looking at his ratings, he's a pure home run guy. We think his contact and his gap power could both be below average. Going to strike out a lot. He's a guy that we knew had some holes in his game when we picked him up. We're hoping that he might be the next Babe Ruth or Shohei Ohtani if everything came together. Right now, not sure exactly what we have with him. Hopefully he'll make it as a pitcher or as a hitter, but I don't necessarily see him being a foundational player, which is unfortunate, but that is the way it happens more often than not with any draftees, and particularly high school draftees. And before we finish up the episode, one final thing to talk about. We've got some preliminary thoughts on what we're going to do in the development lab this year. And we're going to be a little less aggressive with the teenage prospects than we have been over the past couple of years. We haven't had great success in the development lab with the 17, 18, and 19-year-olds that we've put through the development lab. And some of you in the comments have shared that you've experienced similar things. So we're going to continue to invest in prospects, but probably not as much their first couple of years. Wait until they've matured a little, and hopefully we can get a higher success rate going. Two major leaguers who are going to go through the development lab, Duncan Marston, who we just talked about, and Bubba Chandler, who's only 27 years old and still signed for several years with us, does have high adaptability. We're going to have both Chandler and Marston work on secondary pitch improvement, hopefully upgrade a out pitch and maybe improve their stuff a little bit. Jake Ortega, we're going to work on his plate discipline. He's 22 years old, also has that high adaptability, so even though he's a younger player, willing to give a spot in the lab for the guy that we just picked third overall a couple months ago and we think could be helping us in the not too distant future. We failed in the past when he was younger with Bertrand Albrighton in a strength and conditioning program, but he's got everything in terms of personality to potentially make it a success, and given that he's finally hitting this year and he's going to be an A-ball next year, would love to get him a little stronger and a little more resistant to injuries. So we're going to run him through. Roussel Shepard, who we picked fourth overall in 2026, talked about him, was pretty good in A-ball, was not good in high A-ball. But this is probably, given that he's going to be 22 years old in a few weeks, the last big investment that we're going to make in Shepard, working on quality of contact with him. Got to try to move that bat forward, but if this is unsuccessful, we may stop throwing bad or good investment resources after guys that just may not be a big part of our future. Chris Lavonis, pitcher who we picked in the second round back in 2024, working on secondary pitch improvement with him as well. He made it through A, high A, and double A this year. Is a guy that doesn't look like a big-time pitcher for us, but still could be a cheap fifth starter for us down the line, or at the very least a right-handed arm out of the bullpen for a few years when he's not making big money. So we're going to try to work on that secondary pitch improvement with him. Brian Rincon, going to work on his plate discipline. He could be in his final year with us, set to make about $4.9 million in arbitration, but next year, or more accurately the year after next, that arbitration number for him is expected to be over $10 million. As useful as he's been for us, and as much as he's actually played, given his fragile injury proneness, he may be a guy who prices himself out of our organization. So the hope is that by potentially improving his plate discipline and getting him to have a big year offensively for us in 2030, if we're looking to trade him a year from now, he may be even more valuable when we're no longer able to afford him. And then we're also going to put Hideki Etakawa, the rookie out of Japan, through a base running fundamentals workshop. He's actually got acceptable speed, but you can see he's a disaster in terms of his stealing ability and his base running. And hopefully improving his base running a bit may make him a bit more effective as an overall weapon. He could conceivably have a bigger role for us going forward if we need to move on from Brian Rincon because of costs in the coming years. So we'll make at least a small investment in Etakawa, and then perhaps by the time that he comes back from that program. Jackson Ferris, who's dealing with biceps tendonitis for the next 1 to 2 weeks, we might be able to get Jackson Ferris on a program to do something to improve himself once Arakawa is back. So that's the initial plan. I would have loved to get a guy like Cruz Schoolcraft into the lab again this year, but not sure exactly who I'd feel good taking out for him. I feel like Schoolcraft is probably even a bigger risk at this point than the likes of Shepard and Lavonis in terms of his ultimate ability to contribute to us. So there's a limited number of spots, and those are, in theory, the initial decisions that I'm going to make as far as who will be going through the lab for the Oakland A's here in the 2029 to 2030 off season. And with that, we will call it an episode. We'll let you know at the top of the next one what our decision is. Are we coming back in Oakland, or are we looking for greener pastures? And if we're looking for greener pastures, are we going to pursue another rebuild? Are we going to try to jump to a big budget team that will pay us big bucks and give us a ton of resources? Or are we just going to call victory on saving the Oakland A's by virtue of having won a World Series championship and do something entirely different in OOTP going forward? There's a lot of options on the table, and we will let you know what we've decided next time around. Until then, thanks so much for watching, and hope you have a great day.